March 16th, 2022. Well, the topic today, obviously, is the big news of President Zelensky's speech to Congress and I guess the reactions to it. And of course, I have some reactions to the whole thing. I think it was a very effective piece of information warfare, as usual, from the Ukrainians. They're very good at presenting their position. And it is heart touching. It is touching. It's the tragedy that's befallen the Ukrainian people and is just terrible here. And of course, I think what's sometimes missed in it is the flawed leadership of the Ukrainian governments, both before Zelensky and during his period, and how they've handled things, which is what I'm going to try to get into today. Because essentially, look, my viewpoint all along is this war didn't have to happen. And at the same time, let me also say that Russia's actions are extreme and totally unjustified. Both things can be true at the same time. I mean, if you have let's say a bad actor in your neighborhood, if you spend all your time really poking at that bad actor in the neighborhood and agitating it more, and it's already an actor who's prepared to do criminal acts against you, you wouldn't be shocked if he does something like comes and attacks you, or, I mean, this is the way it is when you're dealing with the Ukrainians don't seem to fully take the neighborhood they live in. I mean, Finland for years has been able to live even in the worst of the Soviet period and in the current Russian Federation periods, lived quite peacefully with their Russian neighbor. And their freedom of choice, their democracy has not been in any way impeded by that. It just, they didn't go out of their way in that time to agitate them. Okay. And I think this is a mistake that Ukraine has made since 2014. Probably with some U.S. intervention, I tend to think, actually. I think we see the hands of some of these Soros NGOs in this thing, too. At the same time, if the Russians gunned down 10 people in a bread line or something, that's a war crime. I mean, what can I say? Or maybe it's just an accident of war. We don't know how that occurred. I mean, who can tell without knowing more about it? It's tragic in any event. Okay, if you like these videos, please subscribe and give me a like to help out the algorithm. Comments are appreciated. I know this is a controversial subject, but I just have to kind of state what I really think here. Now, on the speech itself and what President Zelensky is requesting, I think we can say pretty clear-cut. What he's fundamentally requesting is that NATO or the U.S. or some outside force with great capability enter the war against Russia. Now, we can code it in terms like no-fly zone or close the skies, but let's be literal about this. That means war with Russia. Now, how big of a war with Russia, how far it escalates, I don't know. But there's certainly going to be American casualties in it if it happens, that's for sure. And the risk of nuclear use is clearly raised. Now, I can get in a little more detail later in the video on this, but I'm saying that these are serious risks. This is not a joke if you start doing this sort of thing. I guess it is the assumption that the NATO simply declare a no-fly zone and Russia says, ooh, they just declared a no-fly zone. I guess we'll quit flying. I mean, even though the best of our army is in Ukraine right now, we can't give them air support anymore. I somehow don't think that is going to work with the Russians that much. Now, and also at the moment, I don't think the NATO or i.e. the U.S. has really deployed enough of the assets that they would really need to impose this yet. Just looking at, I think we have a defensive type deployment there. I think we do have one squadron F-35s. I don't believe we have any F-22s in theater yet. And these are things I think you would start seeing show up if you're really going to go against the Russian Air Force. And of course, the Russian Air Force should be wary if they show up. I agree with that. And that's where, as I've said in previous videos, that's where the escalation risk really comes in. If we actually outmatch them so dramatically in the conventional war space, they may have no choice but to either capitulate, in which case Putin falls from power. And I don't think, even though a lot of us would like to see him fall from power, I don't think he wants to. And I have a funny feeling even his immediate retainers don't want him to either, because they're probably going down with him if it happens. So that's where the risk of some sort of escalation of tactical nuclear weapons, probably directed against NATO territory, Article 5 and the nuclear threshold both being violated, could happen. And that's why, while if you're Ukrainian, this might be interesting to call for it. I think it's not a good idea for us to do it. Um, so, because I think that's kind of where we're at on this. The other ideas are in there, giving them the MiGs. That's one that just continues to annoy me. And these lame reporters never ask any of the officials the question. Poland has the MiGs. They're their MiGs. If they want to send them to Ukraine, why don't they do it? Why do we have to get involved as U.S.? Why does the rest of NATO have to get involved? Why would you fly them all the way to Ramstein Air Force Base, which is way away from the Ukraine? It's in the western part of Germany. It's not even in the eastern part of Germany. For us to do something, and then somehow we're supposed to get them back into Ukraine. This makes no sense, and I think Poland's been given a lot too much credit for this. I mean, as I understand it, is the hang-up just that we're unwilling to provide replacement F-16s on a one-for-one basis, out of the inventory we have? Because after all, we are systematically replacing F-16s in our own Air Force with F-35s. So it would make sense that we have plenty of pretty well good, usable F-16s, maybe a little older side, but still usable, to be sent to Poland. Is that the problem? I just find this ongoing discussion rather strange. But at any rate, and I kind of agree that with the official position, it will have a marginal effect on the outcome of the war if they did send them. There's other issues about bringing some of the Soviet-era air defense systems that apparently are now our new NATO allies in the East have, to sending those into Ukraine, and I guess that may very well happen. I don't know. I'm not sure how combat ready these systems really are. It's kind of interesting in a way when I think about it, that they have these systems, yet we lost our F-35 deal with Turkey over the fact that they bought a similar system. Oh, well. A lot of paradoxes in politics, right? But at any rate, those are factors to consider. I think the other things was kind of interesting in the speech today when he was complaining about Russian drones. I'm like, Russian drones? Whoa. I haven't heard about that. All I've heard about how great Ukrainian drones were doing. And now we're hearing Russia's got drones too, and they're doing something. I've been pointing out all along the propaganda war out of Ukraine. I don't blame them. If you're you got to use every asset you have in your fight for your life. But also I think the degree to which our media seems to take their position literally and believe it. I mean, that means that they're actually getting their equipment picked off by Russian drones, just like Russia's occasionally getting some of their equipment picked off with a smaller force of Ukrainian drones. Oh, yes. So, so this is, leading to all sorts of really wild statements going on. And, I just think that it needs to be seen in balance. The fact is the Ukrainians have given a good account for themselves. They have really slowed the Russian forces down, inflicted heavy losses, and done a competent job. But to give the idea that somehow they're actually winning the war, I'm not so sure. The problem that Russia has is I don't think that Russia has the resources to actually fully occupy Ukraine and control it. I mean, they can smash it, but they really can't control it. It's the people are just too determined, or at least enough of the people at least are too determined to fight, that any kind of peaceful occupation is just not likely to occur. And I think that at this point, I believe that Putin and his government have come to that conclusion too. He might have really believed going in that somehow that he could pull this off, but it's pretty obvious now he can't. I think it's even obvious to him, I believe. And I'm just saying because of their behavior and what we hear about their negotiating position, I don't think that's the case anymore. So it looks to me like the best step forward for Ukraine would be to actually embrace some of the negotiation positions that Russia's put forward. If certain things can be met. One, obviously, be the end of the war and the withdrawal of Russian troops from all territories except for perhaps anything that ends up getting ceded in the negotiations. That would be, of course, probably Crimea. And then the tricky condition, as I've always mentioned, is what about the Donbass area, those two areas I guess Oblast is how you pronounce it. I don't know. I would say counties or provinces, whatever, in our terminology, in Ukraine. And I think that is an issue that is still tricky to how they resolve it. I mean, one idea would be accept neutralization. After all, Russia has not demanded they be incorporated into the Russian Federation. If the Russian forces would remove and the Ukrainian forces would both remove from those areas and let an international peacekeeping group come in to conduct a free and fair uh, secret ballot election and to see why the people there really want to go. I kind of have a feeling that Ukraine might win that one. I think up front I would have thought the opposite, but now I'm beginning to think that maybe that Russia has really burned their bridges so much that the people probably don't want anything to do with them. We'll see on that if it ever happened. But I mean, I'm just saying, I think that would be a face-saving way for Russia maybe to get out of this whole thing, or to leave them independent for a period of time and then let them decide on their own at a later time. But the basic point is to get the Russian forces out and then make an agreement, a form agreement on on Crimea, a decision that Ukraine would remain neutral, not join NATO, and would not bring foreign forces into the country. Another tricky thing that's going to be in there pretty obviously in any kind of peace deal, if there is one available, is what about the weapon shipments? I mean, obviously, the weapon shipments from the U.S. and NATO countries is escalating pretty rapidly. I'm sure that I understand there's going to be another major shipment announced, and maybe even these MiGs or some air defense systems or whatever. And that would probably only increase if the ceasefire occurred, because obviously there'd be no active interdiction of it anymore. And I think that's one reason why the Russians would be very reluctant to agree to a ceasefire right now until they have a deal, because as soon as that happens, there'd be a wave of weapons coming in to reinforce the Ukrainians, and they would be in a lot worse shape than they are right now. And so that's one of the things that kind of plays into the whole issue. So at any rate, that's kind of what I think about it. I just felt I needed to kind of react to it and kind of state my positions. Again, the whole thing, I fully agree, is unjustified, the invasion of Russia. I think they way overreacted, and strategically, I think they've hurt themselves greatly in the years going forward. I mean, even if this sort of a peace deal were made, that doesn't mean world sanctions end immediately. No, they're still under a lot of sanctions, and so a lot of issues that would have to be worked out there too. And there's still the possibility that this whole thing will be seen as a big failure on the part of Putin, and that he could fall from power potentially. So anyhow, I think that's kind of the situation, and I guess I'll wrap this up for now. Again, I have my addresses of my various social media accounts in the description below, and we can kind of wait and see what happens, what the various leaders decide here in the days going forward, and hope for an end to this conflict as soon as possible.